I said, this building was built as a congregational church in 1914, and this pulpit, that organ over there, and the pews along the side are all original out of that church.
Well, Dad, you just took my little filler piece in between the rest. That's okay, several of them have already been used, so we'll just get right on. If Kevin Baars will come up and talk about their family history, and then we will take a short break getting ready for the rest of them.
Thanks, Joanne. Well, some of you may not know me. I'm Kevin Baars. My wife and I, we live south of here. It's about 9 miles down to our place where my grandpa homesteaded in 1911. But I wanted to, basically I want to talk about, I'm going to start with my grandpa Baars. His name was Fritz Carl Johann, went by Fred Baars. He was born February 12th of 1880 in Chicago, Illinois. While he was still an infant, his parents moved to a place near Mitchell in eastern South Dakota. I really don't know much about his growing up years, but on June 9th of 1904, he married Dorothea C.W. Knobman in Emerald, Nebraska. Dorothea was born December 6th of 1885, somewhere in Nebraska. And I thought that was interesting because my birthday is December 6th also. They welcomed their first child, Wilhelmina, known to most as Minnie, in 1905. Verna was born in 1907 and Wilmer came along in 1909. In the fall of 1911, Fred headed west in search of a homestead and of good water. As the story goes, after tasting the water here in Niobrara County, he knew this is where he wanted to live. He applied for a homestead and his application was approved in December of 1911, and it was filed in the Converse County Courthouse because there wasn't yet a courthouse here in Niobrara County. In the spring of 1912, Fred, Dorothea, and their 3 children came to Wyoming. My Aunt Minnie recalled walking behind the wagon on the way here. She would have been about 7 at the time. On May 1st, 1915, Fred and Dorothea welcomed their 4th and last child, Harry, my dad. And another interesting fact that May 1st is also my wife's birthday. My dad told me that when the midwife was here to help deliver him, that his grandpa had to sleep in the granary because there wasn't enough room for everyone in the little homestead house. The house was built on a rock foundation and had a boxcar roof, kind of a rounded roof. My sister Karen told me that my dad tore down the old house when her and Lorraine were little because they wanted to play in it, and he was concerned they were going to get hurt in it if it fell down on them. The foundation is still there of the old homestead shack, and it's interesting when people come to our house. A lot of times I'll tell them that that foundation up there is where my dad was born in 1915, which is it's kind of neat in my mind. Fred and Dorothea were hard workers, as all folks were in those days. Besides the house and the granary, they built a corn crib, a chicken coop, and a long shed for cattle. All of those are still standing in use today, except for the corn crib that my dad tore down in the mid-1990s when he was 80. We've heard or seen pictures of them raising cattle, turkeys, and evidently row crops like corn and potatoes. My dad told Denise, my wife, that if you look in the pasture east of our house, you can still see where they had their potato cellars. Grandma Dorothea died in 1926. Her obituary says that she had been in failing health for the past year. A trip was made to the Mayo Brothers Hospital at Rochester some months ago with the hope that relief might be obtained. But that and all other efforts made seemed to be of little avail, so when the end came, it served as a relief to her suffering. She was 40 years old. Harry, my dad, was only 11 at the time. Grandpa Fred and Daddy worked together after that for many years, and Grandpa died September 2nd, 1943 at the age of 43. Or 63, excuse me, age 63. All of the Baars children, as in my dad and his siblings, attended school at Node through the 8th grade. Aunt Minnie graduated high school in Lusk in 1925 at the age of 20. She then attended the University of Wyoming in Laramie for one summer. A few months after her mother's death, she married Lawrence O. Butler, who was 21 years her senior, in December of 1926. Lawrence was a brother to both Vivian, Mrs. Henry Kahn, and Mabel, Mrs. Menno Kahn, who were neighbors of the Baars family, which gives a clue as to why we live on Kahn Road instead of on Baars Road. After Lawrence's death in 1951, Minnie moved to town. She worked at Terrell's Grocery and Cold Storage, cooked at the Lusk High School, and in later years did ironing for many in the community. Minnie and Lawrence had no children, but she loved them and enjoyed babysitting, and was known to bake the best cookies and cinnamon rolls. And my wife has a real problem with that. You make good cookies and cinnamon rolls too. Verna married Charles Charlie Humphrey in 1927. Charlie and Verna lived just south of Node, where Matt and Tandy Dockery lived. And the Wevo Angus sale barn, just over the hill here, was once part of Charlie and Verna's ranch. They had two daughters, Dorothy, who married Carl Porter, and Ruth, who married Dan Mankey. And I see that Tracy's here today, so glad to see you here. After spending some time in the nursing home, Verna died in 1981. Wilmer graduated from Lusk High School in 1929 at the age of 20. In his obituary specifically noted he played high school football, so he must have been quite athletic. In 1936, he married Twinkle Boyles, who graduated from Van Tassel High School earlier that year. They were married in Harrison, Nebraska. Wilmer and Twinkle lived in the Lusk area until 1945, when they moved southwest of Keyline, where they ranched and farmed until April of 1976. At that time, they retired and moved to Torrington. They had two children, a son, Dewey, and a daughter, Dorothy. Wilmer died in October of 1986. My dad, Harry, was always a big, stout guy. While attending school at Node, he was the first on and the last off the bus. It was his duty to open and shut all the gates for the bus going to and from the schoolhouse.
Sorry, Kevin.
No, it's no problem. He recalled to me that there were 22 gates to open and shut both ways. In Jimmy's research for the notebook, he confirmed that in some school board notes from 1925 that fact was indeed true. Daddy completed his schooling with the 10th grade in Lusk. He told me that he boarded at the Fagan House, and which I believe is the house just south of the Ranger, and I don't think anybody can confirm or deny that, but I think there was a lot of folks from the country that lived, stayed there during the school year. Like I said, he graduated, or he went through the 10th grade. However, he remained an avid reader and lifelong learner. He loved to tinker and find ways to do things better. When he was 80, he completely tore apart a welder because, as he told me while I stared at the little pieces strewn all over the shop, he wanted to see how it worked. And that was the end of that welder. Good thing I just purchased a new one. The Baars family was German and spoke German in their home. We have Daddy's baptism certificate from the Node Lutheran Church, which is a work of art in itself, and is written entirely in German. In his 80s, he still called baby potatoes, okay, Kartoffeln in die Lederhosen. So if you have baby potatoes and peas and cream, I mean, that's a treat. Anyway, while he was known to all as a very mild-mannered gentleman, his brother-in-law noted that when Harry started cussing in German, you knew he was mad. Harry and his dad raised good Hereford cattle. We found a picture of them at a stock show with a couple of their Hereford bulls. and they were only about this high. He took a lot of pride in raising good cattle with good disposition. Our UB brand he chose because he said it stood for uniform and blocky, good traits in cattle. Daddy told a story about when the Lutheran church building was moved from Node to Lusk. Now I can't find the booklet we have that might have more specific information, so none of this would stand up in a court of law. But Daddy said when they moved the building, they hitched a bunch of teams to the front, and they had the building sitting on log poles. And as the teams would inch the building forward, the men would pick up the poles, run it to the front, and just roll it to town. They did this all the way from Node to where the Lutheran church is today in Lusk at 5th and Lynn. That building's not there anymore. It's my understanding it burned down. Cy West recalled putting up the tent for the first Niobrara County Fair. Cy had put out a call for volunteers to help set up the tent. But when the day came, it was Harry and Cy. So Cy said, "What are we going to do?" And Daddy said, "Well, we've got a tent to put up." So my dad grabbed the large center pole and grabbed it with a big bear hug and stood it up. And Cy ran around the outside of the tent and staked down the outside of the tent, while my dad laughed at him the whole time. On June 1st, 1952, he married the neighbor girl, Charlotte Canfield, who was 19 years his junior. As the homestead house was in disrepair, they moved to Minnie's house while he and some neighbors worked on building a new house. They celebrated their first Easter in the new house in 1954. Harry and Charlotte had 5 children. Their daughter Sharon was stillborn in 1953. Lorraine was adopted in 1954. Karen was born in 1956. Robin was adopted in 1965, and I was adopted in 1967. Yes, there was a big gap in there, so much that my second oldest sister Karen was a high school senior when I was in kindergarten. Karen still says that it was a great deal because it gave her and her friends an excuse to go to little kids movies. See, take Robin. My mom died in 1980 from complications from diabetes at age 46. I was 12, very similar to my dad's age when he lost his mom. Daddy threw himself into raising his family. He made sure we made it to school and all other functions, including being involved in 4-H. It was especially important to him that all of us children were confirmed in the Lutheran Church. When there was a carry-in, Daddy made brownies. Carmen remarked on many occasions that Harry was known for making the best brownies. Whenever he heard that, he would laugh and say, "I just made them from a box." But they were good brownies. Once I graduated from high school and headed off into the big world, he decided it was time to travel a bit. He enjoyed taking bus trips to various places, and on one of those trips he met Bessie Trokiwoinen, a widow from Vail, South Dakota. They married in May of 1989. He died in October of 1986 at the age of 81. Lorraine, alias Lori, says she likes to go by today, lives in Riverton. She had 2 daughters, Tara, who died in an automobile accident in 2002, and Tandy. Karen lives on her late husband's family farm near Hay Springs, Nebraska. She has a daughter, Jennifer, and a son, Ryan. Robin and her husband, Tom, live about 3 miles south of Denise and I on what was Aunt Minnie's old place. They have a son, Robert, and a daughter, Tracy. Denise and I were married in 1991 and moved back to the ranch in the spring of 1994. We live in the house my dad built on the original homestead and have a daughter, Chelsea, and a son, Kirby. It's a blessing to live here and work the land that my grandpa came to 114 years ago. I would hope that they would be honored that we are still doing what they did after all this time. Thank you.